Good morning, everybody. Today is 29th of September, year 2007. We continue our Sutta study. Today we are going to discuss the Sutta called the Honeyball Madhupindika. Madhu means honey. Pindika is lumps. Anatha Pindika. Anatha Pindika is those who, the one who gave lumps of food to refugees. Anatha means refugees, homeless people in America, or beggars. So that is why he is called Anatha Pindika. So the word Pindika you can read here also, Madhupindika. Pindika, and also we call Pindapata. Pindapata, people put food into the lumps of food, into balls. It may be more appropriate in Laos because they have sticky rice. You can make lumps of sticky rice and put it into the ball. So, see the word Madhu Pindika. Pinda is Pinda Dana, Pinda Pata, and so forth. The word Pinda is used. This is how Venerable Ananda suggested this name. He asked Venerable Ananda at the end, said, Bhante is like a honey ball. And Buddha said, yes, then you call it Honeyball Sutta. So we are going to study Honeyball Sutta today. So when Buddha was living in Kapilavatu, Nigrodharama, so Buddha, after in the morning, he took his alms bowl and went to Kapilavatu for alms round. Kapilavatum Pindaya Pavisi. There also the word Pindaya for Pindapata. So there he received his food, and there was a forest called Mahavana, great forest, great wood. So he went there for resting during the daytime. Then sat down under Dvedhavitakka. Belu means sometimes we call, in English, I don't know, you may call it rose apple, or we call in Sinhalese belly. So he sat down there, and Sakya king called Dandapani. Danda means a stick, walking stick. Pani means hand. He always walked with a walking stick because he was an old man. As an old man, he was carrying his walking stick. He also walked there for exercise, and saw the Buddha, and simply after just asking few questions how he was and so forth, he straightaway asked him a question. What does the recluse assert? What does he proclaim? It's a very incourteous way of asking a question. He was very arrogant and was not interested in learning Dhamma at all. And also he was not interested in learning any Dhamma. He was a follower of Dvedhavitakka, and Dvedhavitakka has poisoned his mind, because Dvedhavitakka told him and others that Buddha hated Dvedhavitakka's family. So he married his sister. She was good enough to be a queen of Chakravarti, universal monarch. And this Gautama married her, and he hated our family so much that he did not want to have children. So when my sister gave birth to Rahula, he took Rahula also, so that if Rahula stayed home, he would have got married and have children. In order to destroy our family, he took even our nephew, and ordained him. So he said, but I could not stay home without seeing my nephew. I also went to the monastery, much reluctantly, and became a monk under him. From the day I went to the monastery, he never looked at me straight in my eyes. He was always looking down, looking away, and in front of everybody he insulted me, saying I will be born in hell and so forth. And he hated our family. That was Dvedhavitakka's accusation. He was the one, Bhu Nahu. He is the one who he's a family destroyer. And this is what he has done to our family. Now we don't have any children. So Dandapani was his follower. So he himself, now being very arrogant, came and asked the Buddha this question in a very impolite way. Buddha also was very smart. He gave an answer, nobody can figure out the meaning. You read it. When he asked him, you read the answer. Friend, this is very good English translation, but try to understand it. Friends, I assert and proclaim my teaching in such a way that one does not quarrel with anyone in the world, with its gods and maras and its Brahmins, in this generation with its recluses and Brahmins, its princes and its people, in such a way that perception no more underlie that Brahmin who abides detached from sensual pleasures, without perplexity, shorn of worries, free from craving for any kind of being. Can you figure out the meaning? So, this has a deep meaning. Buddha gave in such a complex way that Dandapani, his head began to spin. He could not understand. So when this was said, Dandapani the Sakyan shook his head, wagged his tongue. He put the tongue out and wagged his tongue and traced his eyebrows until his forehead was puckered in 3 lines. Then he departed, leaning on his stick. You see?
The answer also pointed to the anger and quarrelsome nature of the questioner and showed that he was coming from an angry place.
Yeah.
Yes. The Buddha Dharma would not generate anger in someone. So that part may have helped reverse his mind state, his emotional state. Even though he was perplexed, he pointed to his own anger.
Yeah. But he wanted to explain this to bhikkhus. So Buddha, I think, might have had a good laugh when this man, seeing this man's reaction, and he went away. Then, when Buddha went to the Nigroda park, where he sat down and there were bhikkhus, then so Buddha had reported to them what had taken place between him and Dandapani. And then a certain bhikkhu asked the Buddha, Blessed One, certain bhikkhu means not non-monk, unknown monk, nobody knew his name, but he was very much inquisitive. He wanted to know the meaning. So he asked the Buddha, but Venerable Sir, how does the Blessed One assert and proclaim this teaching in such a way that he does not quarrel with anyone in the world, with his gods, his Maras, and with its Brahmins in the generation of this generation with the recluses and Brahmins, its princes and its people. In another place, Buddha said, Ahang lokena na vivadami loko maya vivadati. I do not quarrel with the world quarrels with me. And this is the essence of that statement here. So this unknown monk asked the Buddha, Venerable Sir, how is it that perception no more underlie the Blessed One? That Brahmins who abides detached from sensual pleasures without perplexity, shorn of worry, free from craving for any kind of being. Then Buddha explained it, also in a very brief way. He did not go to elaborate the meaning of this passage. But his explanation to these bhikkhus is relatively clearer than his original answer to Dandapani. Buddha said, bhikkhus, as to the source through which perceptions and notions what is these perceptions and notions? Tanha ditti. And then mental proliferations beset a man. What is proliferation? Proliferation is rapid increase in number. Rapid increase of cells or parts, organism in our body. There's a proliferation. One triggers and so many things happen. As soon as one starts, many other things like ripples reproduce. Because of this one single event, so many other things are happening at the same, as a result of this. Just like when you throw a stone to water, it generates one ripple, 2, 3, 4, 5, and many, many ripples, and goes round and round, and so many ripples. Similarly, in our physical body, cells begin to multiply at a very high speed. So many of them, especially at the very, very embryonic stage, about, I think, 2,000 times per second, our body grows at that very primitive stage of our life. That kind of high-speed growth of many cells at the same time is called proliferation. Now, Buddha used this word in such a beautiful way. Proliferation, proliferation, the word Buddha used is papanca. Papanca. When one type of thought arises, so many other thoughts arise depending on that particular thought. So Buddha gives reason. If nothing is found there, found there means at that particular place, tatta, nothing is there. To delight in, there means actually 12 ayatanas. 12 ayatanas means eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and mind, and their respective objects. Form, sound, smell, taste, touch and thoughts. These are called there. The word there means those 12 places. Okay? Mental relation. If nothing is found there to delight in, we delight in our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and mind and their objects. We can see this in Mahasatipatthana Sutta. Sakopane satanna khatta uppajjamana uppajjati. In Mahasatipatthana Sutta, Buddha asks, that particular craving, when arises, where does it arise? Sakopane satanna khatta uppajjamana uppajjati. That craving, desire, when it arises, where does it arise? Then Buddha said, Chakkum bhikkhave piyarupam sadhurupam ette satanna uppajjamana uppajjati. Eyes are pleasant, beautiful, and their craving arises. Rupam bhikkhave piyarupam sadhurupam ette satanna uppajjamana uppajjati. Form is pleasant, beautiful, and their craving arises. Chakku viññānam bhikkhave piyarupam sadhurupam ette satanna uppajjamana uppajjati. Eye consciousness is pleasant, beautiful, and their craving arises. Chakku sampasso bhikkhave piyarupam sadhurupam ette satanna uppajjamana uppajjati. eye contact is pleasant, beautiful, agreeable, and their craving arises. So he gave like this 60 places where craving arises, and those 60 places I mentioned the other day. For your record, I mention it once again very slowly, not giving Pali but only in English. I, 1, visual object 2, eye consciousness 3, eye contact 4, a recognition arising through the eye contact 5, then Chakkum Vikevira Sutta Rupa Sakvinyana Passo, then feeling that arises through the eye, 6, then Rupa Sanya, we mentioned this, then thought that arises depending on this, 7, and the craving that arises due to the thought, 8, and then further thinking is called vitakka, 9, and vichara, that is deliberate, repeated, continuous thinking and thinking, 10. So you have 10. Again, eyes, form, eye consciousness, 3, and eye contact, 4, and feeling, 5, and then perception, 6, and then perception means recognition, then the thought, 7, and then craving, 8, and then thought again to thinking in details, 9, and then further thinking depending on this thinking, continuous thinking, that's called vichara. When one thought arises, then more thoughts arise, that is called vichara. And then that is the stage where we have proliferations. Now this is how these things are proliferated. What started first? Eye, then visual objects, then consciousness, contact, and then the contact and the feeling, and then recognition, and then thought, desire, more thoughts, and further thoughts, 10. Now all depends on one object, one sense, eye. The same thing happens with ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. There are 6 senses. When you multiply these 10 by 6, you get 60. Okay? Now, these are the places where craving arises. And when the Buddha used the word there, he had in mind, there means these 60 places. Delight, when craving arises, delight arises. So, welcome and hold too, when we are delighted in something, we welcome it, we hold on to it. This is the end of underlying tendencies. What are the underlying tendencies? Tanha, mana, ditti. Underlying tendencies are tanha, mana, ditti. Lust of underlying tendencies to aversion, of underlying tendencies to view, and of underlying tendencies to doubt. Then these are called actually anusayas. Underlying tendencies to lust is one. There are 7 anusayas I mentioned here. Remember, anusaya, anu means together with. Saya means sleeping. These are sleeping under our consciousness. Sometimes we may call in subconsciousness. They are sleeping along with subconsciousness. And therefore they are called anusaya. Saya means sleeping. So they sleep with this, the subconscious mind sleep with these tendencies. What are they? Lust, aversion, views, wrong view. Whenever the word view is used without any description, it means wrong view. Then doubt, vichikiccha. Then conceit, mana, and how many? 6 is bhava, becoming, desire for being, and 7 is ignorance. So how many tendencies are there? 7. What are they? They are lust, aversion, and then wrong view, doubt, conceit, being, and ignorance. So Buddha says, because as to the source through which perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset a man, if nothing is there, if nothing is found there, that means in those 60 places, if there is no delight, no welcoming, nothing hold on to, that means if there is, what do we welcome? We welcome lust, we welcome we welcome aversion, welcome views, welcome doubts, we welcome conceit, we welcome a desire for being, we welcome ignorance. And if these things are not in those 60 places, this is the end of resorting to rods and weapons. Taking rods, clubs, weapons of quarrels, brawls, disputes, recrimination, malicious words, false speech. Here, these evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. So, why we fight, why we take clubs, why we take weapons, why we take knives, why we use bombs, why we use guns, Why quarrel? Why brawls? Why dispute? Because we have these underlying tendencies in those 60 places. Right? So Buddha said, if there is nothing with these underlying tendencies arise, because there is delight and welcoming. Abhinanditabbang, abhivaditabbang. Abhinanditabba means something to be pleased. Abhivaditabba means something to be said. Vadana means saying, talking. And if there is nothing to be delighted and nothing to talk about, then there are no these tendencies, underlying tendencies. When there are no tendencies, there is no fight, no quarrel, no guns, no weapons, no bombs. See how profound the answer, Buddha's answer, given in such a brief way, and this man could not understand naturally, because he came from not peaceful state, he came from very state of mind with poison. His mind had already been poisoned by Dvedhavitakka. And this is why I said, the other day when we were talking about Alagadupama Sutta, when you poison the mind, how far it can go? When you poison the body, you can cure it. There are chemicals. But if you poison the mind, it is incurable. This man's mind was so poisoned by Dvedhavitakka that even the Buddha could not put him right, correct him. Knowing that, Buddha did not want to waste his time explaining the things. Since he was arrogant, aggressive, incourteous, Buddha gave an answer. Okay, this is what I believe. He could not digest it. He could not understand it. He put his tongue out, wagged it, raised his eyebrows, made wrinkles on his face, and said, went away. When he left, Buddha explained the meaning to the bhikkhus. Bhikkhus, this is what I said, and this is its meaning. So that is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Sublime One rose from his seat and went into his dwelling. Then comes very interesting part. Soon after the Blessed One had gone, the bhikkhus considered, now friends, the Blessed One has risen from his seat and gone into his dwelling after giving a summary in brief without expounding the detailed meaning. Now, who will explain this in detail? They became so curious. Buddha simply aroused their curiosity to have a good Dhamma discussion. So, they were so interested in Dhamma. They were not bewildered, they were not disappointed. Now they had interest in learning and they were thinking, whom shall we go? Then they all remembered Mahakaccana. Mahakaccana is praised by the teacher and esteemed by his wise companions in the holy life. He is capable of expounding the details meaning. Suppose we all went to him and requested him to explain the meaning of this statement. So, Venerable Mahakaccana was extremely simple, ordinary monk. He was enlightened and therefore he was simple. He was humble. Only when we are not enlightened, we are arrogant, uptight, rigid, angry. So you can see the difference between these two. So Venerable Mahakaccana replied, Friends, it is as though a man needing hardwood, seeking hardwood, wandering in search of hardwood, thought that hardwood should be sought for among the branches and leaves of a great tree, standing possessed of hardwood, after he had passed over the root and trunk. So he gave this very beautiful simile, and he said, why didn't you ask the Buddha? He is the Blessed One, by whom when we were face to face. For knowing the Blessed One knows, you see, this is Mahakaccana's reply. Buddha is, these words, if you remember, would be very, very good for you. Janang janati, knowing he knows, not unknowing he thinks that he knows. And you see, passang passati, seeing, he can say, I see, not pretending to see. Chakkubhuto, chakkubhuto is, he is vision. And that means I and seeing are one in him. Jnana bhuto, he is knowledge. His knowledge and knowing knowledge, the jnana, wisdom are the same. Then he is the Dhamma, Dhamma bhuto. He is the Holy One, Brahma bhuto. Some people translate this Brahma bhuto as he is the Brahma, creator. But the word Brahma is used here to mean holy or noble. Holy. He is the sayer, Vatta, the sayer. Pavatta, proclaimer. Atthasya ninnata, ninneta, elucidator of meanings. You see, amatasya data, wonderful words. The giver of the deathless. You see, Dhamma Sami, the Lord of the Dhamma. There are monks called Dhamma Sami. The Buddha is the real Dhamma Sami. Lord of Sami means Lord. Sometimes in Sri Lanka, people call bhikkhus Swami Nuhansa. That is Honorable's Lord. Swami means Lord.
Today they went to that ordination of Panyasani, the Burmese monk.
Panyasani, yeah. Honor of wisdom. Then the Tathagata. Why didn't you ask him? He is all this. You just passed the hardwood tree looking for hardwood. You passed the tree and thought the leaves are for hardwood and the branches are hardwood. Bark is hardwood. Inner skin is hardwood. You have just passed all this and come to me. Then these monks begged him, Venerable, surely Venerable friend Mahakaccana. They don't call him Venerable, they call Asma. Asma means friend, Kaccana. Then they repeated the same thing about the Buddha. And then they said, the Venerable Mahakaccana is capable of expounding the detailed meaning of the summary given in brief by the Blessed One. Without expounding the details meaning, let the Venerable Mahakaccana expound it without finding it trouble. If Venerable Mahakaccana don't mind, please explain the meaning to us. When they begged him, he began to explain. He said, friends, and this passage also is very important to remember if possible. Some people, because it is so when you are so much intrigued with the Dhamma, it may not be very difficult to memorize the passages like this. We memorize this passage in Pali. It is Chakkanchauso patichu rupechu upajiti chakku vinyanan thinna sangati passo passapacchaya vedana yang vedeti tang sanjanati yang sanjanati tang vitaketi yang vitaketi tang papancheti yang papancheti tato nidanam purusam papanja sanya sanka samudacharanti atitanagata paccuppannesu chakku vinyeshu rupesu. At least this only 4-5 Pali lines. But if you cannot memorize Pali, at least try to remember this English translation. Dependent on I and forms, I consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. What one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one thinks about. What one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. See here the word proliferate comes again. This is a big word, because only what one thinks, based on this, they keep thinking, endlessly they can think. That is why it is called proliferation. With what one has mentally proliferated, as the source, perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset a man with respect to past, future, and present forms cognizable through the I. So the same thing is repeated for the ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Now, see the way how the mental proliferation begins. It begins with our senses. He gave an example of eye. When we see an object, when not seeing an object, when object is present, this is how we, us and the world unite. We unite with the world this way, through our senses. So the process is, I consciousness does not arise without objects and I. And this meeting of these three is called contact. Whenever we talk about contact, it simply means meeting of three things. Contact does not mean something happening between two. For example, we have eyes, objects are there is no contact. So what is missing? Consciousness. There must be consciousness. If somebody is not conscious, even if the eyes are there, objects are there is no contact. So you to have, when people say, have eye contact, it doesn't mean that we trigger the rest of conceptual proliferation. If we trigger all conceptual proliferation, then eye contact is dangerous. If we do not have the rest of the proliferations, rest of the things, just mere eye contact doesn't hurt. But there has to be three things to make. Tinnan sangati, in Pali word is very, very clear. Tinnan sangati passo. Sangati means meeting. Sangamana. Sangam, in India there's 3 rivers in Allahabad. Ganga, Yamuna, Achiravati. These 3 rivers join together at Allahabad. And that place is called Sangam, meeting. So, Tinnan Sangati Passo. Passa means meeting of 3 things. What are the 3 things? It may be eye, or ear, or nose, tongue, body, or mind. That is number 1. 2 is either form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or mental objects. Mental objects are such as like memories of the past. And then 3rd is consciousness. So senses, sensory objects, and consciousness. When these 3 meet together, that is what is called contact. Then what happens when there is a contact? Depending on the contact, feeling arises naturally. Now, then perception arises. These 5, this is called samudacharana. Samudacharana means they go together. These 5 go together. What are the 5? Phassa, Vedana, Sanya, Vijnana, and Manasikara. Manasikara must be there, Manasikara is not mentioned here. Phassa, Vedana, Sanya, Vijnana, Manasikara. Vijnana is treated separately in some places. When we describe Nama Rupa, but instead of Vijnana we have Manasikara. But it's attention. Without attention, we don't know anything. So these 5 in this place, these 5, the sense, consciousness, contact, then feeling and perception. This is what you call samudachara. Associating, traveling, going together. Then recognition arises, perception. When we recognize or perceive, then we begin to think. What one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. Only when we begin to think about something, then proliferation, multiplying, increasing, becoming more and more of that particular kind or different kind coming together, increase. And that depends on the objects that we have seen, heard, smelled, touched, and thought. They can be past, present, or future. So Venerable Mahakaccana repeated this for other four senses to complete his explanation. I want to give an example of conceptual proliferation. You can think thousands, millions of examples in your own life. There was a monk, his name was Bhagineya Sangharakita. His brother was Sangharakita. His uncle was Sangharakita. This was his nephew. One day somebody gave him a new robe. Then he thought, I must give it to my uncle. So he brought this robe and offered to his uncle, Sangharakita. Sangharakita said, no, I have enough robe, you keep it. He said, no, please, somebody gave me, I don't want, I have too many robes, please accept me for me. He said, no, I have enough robe, you keep it. Again he said, if you have plenty of robes, you give to somebody else or put in the storeroom. Normally monks are not supposed to receive too many robes. If they have more than 3, they must put it in the storeroom. They are supposed to use only 3. And this was an extra robe. This young monk also was very, Vinaya conscious monk. The teacher also was Vinaya conscious monk. And they they were very simple. He did not accept it. Then he put the robe on a table and then he started fanning the teacher, standing behind. He went on fanning, and then he started this conceptual proliferation. He thought, my uncle doesn't seem to like me. That is why he did not accept my gift. Why should I stay under him in his temple? When he doesn't like me, why should I stay? I disrobe. But after disrobing, how can I live? I do little odd jobs here and there and buy a female goat. And then I later on sell that goat and get little money. That may be enough for me to have a little family. I will marry a girl, and then when we live together, we will have a child, and then after that I must come and see him again. When we are coming back, this child, my wife, accidentally dropped the child, and child gets hurt, and child starts crying, and then I beat her. So he beat the monk. With the fan he beat his own teacher, his own uncle. Then the uncle asked him, what have I done for your wife's mistake? So he was reading the monk's mind, who was standing behind, and he did not know that. So he read his thoughts. Now this is how conceptual proliferation goes on. You need only very little thing. And you think, oh, he must be angry with me. Oh, he must have said something. Oh, I know. He had another friend. I know, she has another friend. Or something like that they think. And then on that they keep thinking day and night and build up a story. Has that not happened to you? We build up all kinds of stories in our mind. And this is what is called conceptual proliferation. We start with tiny little thing and multiply it into various things. Imagination, fantasizing, daydreaming, all the time. So, then this Venerable Mahakaccana says, when there is no I, no form, and no I consciousness, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of contact. How can there be contact? If these things are what contact? Eye contact. If these things are not present, how can there be eye contact? When there is no manifestation of contact, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of feelings. How can feeling arise if there is no contact? When there is no manifestation of feeling, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of perception. There has to be something to perceive. When there is no perception, manifestation of perception, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of thinking. When there is no manifestation of thinking, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of besetment of perceptions and notions of mental proliferation. Buddha said, Tato nidanam purusam papanya sanya sanka samudacharanti. Thanametang vijjati vitakka panyayanti. Okay, there are no deliberation, no thinking. If there are nothing, when I was in graduate school, we were asked to write papers. I wrote a paper on can thought arise without object? Thought cannot arise in our mind without object. Because I had read this discourse long ago. And then he repeated that about years and so forth. Friends, when the Blessed One, he's going to conclude it, rose from his seat and went into his dwelling after giving a summary in brief without expounding the detailed meaning. That is, bhikkhus, and he repeated the same thing that the Buddha mentioned at the beginning. As to the source through which perceptions and notions born of mental proliferations beset a man, if nothing is found there to delight in, so nothing is there, we already have seen, there really means is these six senses and their objects. Welcome and hold on to, that is delight, and adjosana, holding on to. This is the end of underlying tendencies of lust. Now we mentioned when there are no senses, no sensory objects, and contact and so forth, then the underlying tendency of lust. There is no room for lust to arise, no room for aversion to arise, no room for tendency of to wrong view to arise, and underlying tendency of doubt to arise, no room for underlying tendency to conceit arise, and there is no room of underlying tendency to desire for beings to arise, and there is no room for the underlying tendency to ignorance to arise. All these arise when there are senses, sensory objects, contact, consciousness, contact, feeling, perceptions, thought, and then conceptual proliferation start. If there are no such things, there is no room for any of these underlying tendencies to arise. These underlying tendencies to arise means underlying tendencies, even if they are underlying, they remain dormant. They don't become active. And then it is very easy to get rid of them. Once they start working, it is very difficult to get rid of them. They start working when we have this fuel. The fuel is senses, sensory objects, consciousness, contact, feeling and so forth. When they arise, then they stir up these lying down underlying tendencies. And that is why in meditation we are asked to restrain our senses. Remember I was talking about restraining our senses? I said restraining is like filtering. It is just like when you want to clean this room so perfectly to make it, to convert it to a surgical operation theatre. What would you do? You close all the doors, all the windows, and even remove the carpet and clean the floor, clean everything, vacuum, dust and mop and so forth, and then use detergent and antiseptics, detergents and so forth, and clean the whole thing. To do that, you got to first close doors and windows. While keeping doors and windows open, no matter how much you clean here, dust will come and settle here. Similarly, in order to get rid of these inner underlying tendencies, we have to restrain our senses. When we restrain our senses, then it is very easy for us to deal with what is already under there. So, this discourse is very important. So, what the Buddha mentioned is that as long as the eyes are open to the external things, visual objects are there, eye consciousness, contact, feeling, perceptions, thought, volitional formations, and the conceptual proliferation trigger. And then they bring more and more of them into these underlying tendencies, and then underlying tendencies also come out and becomes complex. Greed is there, aversion is there, doubt, wrong views, doubt, conceit, desire for beings, ignorance, they all stir up and then they all join with those things that come from outside, through our senses. You can see the complexity of thoughts. These thoughts get into proliferation. They proliferate because of this stirring up compounded things from inside, outside. That is why the Buddha said in Majjhima Nikaya, Anto jata bahijata. A deity came and asked the Buddha, Anto jata bahijata. Jata jadito paja. Tang tang gotam putthan ko imang vijjate jatang. A divine being came to the Buddha and asked him, there are internal entanglement, external entanglement. How I came to ask you, Gautama Buddha, how can one get rid of this entanglement? How one can get unentangled? So Buddha gave very beautiful discourse. That is the beginning of whole Visuddhimagga. Sile patittaya narosa panyo chittam panyancha bhave atapi nipako bhikkhu koima soimang vijjate jatang, and so forth. First have the moral training, sila, practice concentration, practice mindfulness. With these three things one can unentangle from entanglement. Then the bhikkhus, having delighted and rejoiced in the Venerable Mahakaccana's words, rose from their seats and went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, they sat down at one side and told the Blessed One all that had taken place after he had left. Then, Venerable Sir, we went to Venerable Mahakaccana and asked him about the meaning. Mahakaccana explained the meaning to us with these terms. Then Buddha said, Buddha was so generous, so compassionate. He said, Mahakaccana is wise because Mahakaccana has great wisdom. If you had asked me the meaning of this, I would have explained it to you in the same way that Mahakaccana has explained it. Mahakaccana was the Buddha's disciple. Buddha simply acknowledged it. He did not have anything to add to it, anything to subtract from it. He said, I would have explained it to you in the same way as Mahakaccana did. Such is the meaning of this, and so you should remember it. He was so, wonderful. Then Venerable Ananda said to the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, just as if a man exhausted by hunger and weakness came upon Honeyball, wherever he would taste it, he would find a sweet, delectable flavor. So too, Venerable Sir, any able-minded bhikkhu, wherever he might scrutinize with wisdom the meaning of this discourse on the Dhamma, would find satisfaction, confidence of mind. Venerable Sir, what is the name of this discourse on the Dhamma? As to that, Ananda, you may remember this discourse on the Dhamma as the Honeyball discourse. Buddha simply confirmed. He did not amend it. He said, you call it my encounter with Dandapani, discourse on the discourse, Buddha's encounter with Dandapani. Don't. He did not come up with that kind of new topic, new subject. He said, then call it Madhupindika. Then, let us try to go to the next one, since it is just after the first one, following the... So, Buddha, this is called Dvedhavitakka. Vitakka means thought. Dvedha means two kinds. Dve means two. And Buddha said, bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I set on one side thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty. Now, these are called vitakka. In Pali, then discourse in Pali also called vitakka, Dvedhavitakka. Kama vitakko, vyapada vitakko, vihingsa vitakko. Thought of sensual desire, thought of hatred, and thought of cruelty. On one side. And I said on the other side, thought of renunciation, nekkhamma vitakka, thought of non-ill will, avyapada vitakka, thought of non-cruelty, avihingsa vitakka. Now, we mention the word vitakka as in Samma Sankappa, the Noble Eightfold Path, the second step of the Noble Eightfold Path is called Samma Sankappa. Samma Sankappa also defined as Nekkhamma Sankappa, Avyapada Sankappa, Avihimsa Sankappa. So here the Buddha used the word Nekkhamma Vitakka, Avyapada Vitakka, Avihimsa Vitakka. That means Vitakka, Sankappa are used synonymously, no difference whatsoever. In some places he used Vitakka, some places Sankappa. So, when he divided these thoughts into these two, as I abided thus, diligent, ardent, resolute, appamattassa atapino pahitattassa. Appamatta means diligent, atapino pahitatta means ardent and resolute. Thought of sensual desire arose in me. Now, what is the first thought? Thought of nekkhamma, renunciation, giving up. What is to be given up? Given up thought of sensual desire. I mentioned the other day an example of giving up sensual desire with regard to buying a pair of shoes. Remember? So that is the sensual desire for that particular object, that is pleasing your sense. So it is not renouncing the world, going into the forest, but beginning with something, anything that triggers our desire. I understood thus, this thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. So, this is his meditation. This is not something, as I mentioned many times, meditation is not something sitting in one place, focusing mind on the breath all the time. You look at the mind and see what is happening and recognize it. Okay, greed arose in me. Then what? This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. You see, when greed arises, we must think, this is hurting me. This hurts others as well. Because when I try to fulfill my desire, my greed, I am not going to do it alone. I need a company. I need objects. I need things. And I have to compete. And remember those 10 similes we mentioned? Simile of skeleton, the dog is going to a hungry dog looking for food and so forth. Remember those similes? Those similes we must remember and bring to our mind and reflect. This is how it causes affliction. Especially this we must do only when we meditate. When we meditate, we must think like this. In meditation does not simply mean sitting and focusing mind only on one object all the time. And then this leads to my own affliction and both. It obstructs wisdom. Obstruct wisdom, which is a nivarana. Nivarana means obstruction. Obstruct. It's called panya nirodhika. Panya nirodhika. Wisdom, it obstructs, prevents wisdom. Cause difficulties. Vighata pakkiko. This causes difficulties. When sense desire arises, it is not going to make it easy for us. It really makes things very, very difficult for us to deal with and acquire. And to affliction, difficult, and leads away from nibbana. That is the most important thing. Anibbana samvattaniko. When I consider this leads to others' affliction, it subsides in me. When I consider this leads to affliction of both, it subsides in me. You see, when we think this way, that particular mental state slowly becomes weak and mind settles down. This is what we call thinking the disadvantage or danger of unwholesome mental states. And this obstructs wisdom, causes difficulty, leads away from us. Whenever thoughts of sensual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, and did away with it. This is how he did it away with it. And he repeated this with regard to other two vitakkas. Vihimsa vitakka, vyapada vitakka. Then what happened? This part also is very important to remember. Bhikkhus whatever a bhikkhu frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. This is a very important sentence to remember. This whole sentence we must remember. Whatever we think frequently, again and again and again and again, we are conditioning ourselves to think that way. You see, that will become the inclination. Yanyadeva bhikkhave bhikkhu bahula manuvitakketi anuvicareti tatha tatha nati hoti cetata. Nati means tending towards it, inclining, going sloping in that direction. Isn't it true? If you keep hating somebody and just keep hatred in you, hating, as soon as you get up in the morning you hate, all day you hate, go to bed with this hate, and then hate. Finally what happens? When you meet the person, even if for the first time you get so angry, and then what happens? Angry, hateful word comes out of your mouth. Even if the person says something good, you have no very pleasant word to respond. Hate, because that is what we have already cultivated. This is what we call obsession. Buddha explained obsession in this way. Obsession is something that you repeatedly do again and again and again and again. Then the mind obsesses with that particular thing. We call it Western psychology conditioning, obsession, obsessive compulsive behavior, and so forth. There are very big bombastic terms to explain this whole process. Buddha simply put it in this way: whatever we think again and again and again and again, that becomes our habit. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of sensual desire, he has abandoned the thought of renunciation to cultivate the thought of sensual desire. And then his mind inclines to thought of sensual desire. You see, how can say thought of renunciation arise in the mind which always is thinking of sensual desire? That's what has happened to people. People always think of sensual desire. Open your eyes. Everywhere, everything is to arouse our sensual desire. Everywhere. Open the mass media, newspaper, radio, TV, book, go out and open your eyes and shopping here and there. Everything is very well organized to arouse our greed. Not ill-organized, not badly organized, very well, professionally organized to arouse our greed. Under that circumstances, in those situations, can we think of thought of renunciation? They laugh at you, you are crazy. And this is the work of Mara. I want to finish this with my little remark. Mara tells us, you see, this is the only life you have. Look around, enjoy. You are not going to be young twice. It is passing phenomena. During that time, do whatever you want. You are not going to get it again. Enjoy. Things are here for us to enjoy. Don't miss this opportunity. Don't fool yourself. Go, enjoy. This is how Mara, and also Mara would tell us, you can do all wholesome meritorious deeds while living at home, having your enjoyment, your pleasure. You can still do meritorious deeds. Why want to give up anything? Mara keeps coming and telling us again and again the same thing. And Mara put his army here and there, everywhere, to trap you. And you are trapped. So, that is what the Buddha mentioned in very simple language. If we train ourselves to be a certain way, That is the way we will be. Anyway, we must stop here.